Our first job when it comes to making the jacket is to sew on the little beads for buttons where you've marked the points over here. So you will find your beads in the little bag. Be really careful because they are teeny tiny and they get lost very easily, even more easily than the eyes. So you just need to, I wouldn't get them out until now, and just pop them to one side. And you want to sew these on with some cream thread, so just the same as when take a strand from the piece you cut to make the breeches with, and we're going to do exactly the same again, fold it in half to use a knotless loop start. And we're going to sew these little beads on so that they are kind of on their sides. So rather than having them like that so that you can see the hole, we will have them like that, so they're on their ends, which means that, well, first of all we'll secure the thread. So what I'm going to do is just come up from slightly under where you've made that mark for the first button, or you can come up slightly over, it doesn't matter. Leave the loop at the back, take one of the beads and pop it onto your needle, and then come back slightly the other side of the mark. So you're basically leaving enough space for that bead to sit in between those two stitches. So you can either start at the bottom and end at the top like I've done, or you can start slightly above the marker and end slightly below. And then you're going to put your needle through that loop and pull it, which will leave that bead sat on the top like that. I'm going to go through once again, so from bottom to top. I'm going to secure each of these beads with 2 stitches. They won't obviously withstand a huge amount of stress, but it just makes them slightly less delicate than if you were only putting on with 1. So that's nice and secure. And then move over to, you can go all the way down this side and up this side. I'm just going to go kind of zigzag from side to side. So I'm going to come again from top to bottom, slightly above the mark. If you'll just see there, if you pull the thread too tight now, it will bunch up the fabric. You want to just leave it loose enough that that stitch isn't bunched up, it's just left straight. So again, pop, let's have one that's a similar size, not that it really matters. Pop a bead on your needle, come down slightly beneath the marker, go to the top again, thread your needle through that bead, pull the thread through and back down through the fabric underneath to secure it. So I'm going to carry on and do all of these 8 beads for buttons in exactly the same way, and then I'll come back and we'll move on to the next part. Once you've sewn all your buttons in place, to secure the end of the thread, you should just kind of make a few stitches on top of each other around one of the existing stitches on the back. So I'm going to just go under this and one at the back, and you want to push it so it's directly beneath the bead, so that way you won't see the stitches from the front. So I'm going to go one right exactly on top of the last one I did. I'm going to go through a 3rd time, and this time I'm going to put my needle through that loop before I pull it tight. I'm going to put it through the loop once, and then I'm going to put it through the loop a 2nd time, and then when I pull that tight it will make a nice strong knot, and then you can trim off the end of the thread there, and then they're all secure and held in place. The next thing we need to do is to sew the actual jacket itself together. So the way we do this, it's really easy because it's basically a flat, all flat pieces, no curves to match. You join, or first of all you layer them up. So you put the back coat piece on the table, whoops, sorry, shaking the camera there, put the left hand side down on top of it, matching up these arm and side pieces, and then overlap the right hand piece over the top. So the piece with the buttons should be on top of the piece on the left. We're then going to join this top sleeve seam here and on the other side, and then we're going to do this seam here around the underarm and again on the other side. We're going to use 2 strands. We're going to stitch it exactly like we did the trousers, so we're going to use green thread this time, roughly 1 meter again, so 2 arms lengths, a single strand folded in half using blanket stitch, and I will do those and then I'll come back to you. So you just, as I say, this seam, this seam, this seam, this seam, each of them needs to be stitched separately, and that way there will be holes left for the arms to go through, and all of this under here will open up. You don't need to do them in any particular order because you're not sewing any of this closed at the moment, so you can do them one at a time. I would probably stitch this and this and then come back and stitch this and this. So I'll do those and then I'll come back to show you where we go next. Once you've got those 4 seams stitched, so you'll see I've done those 2 shoulder seams and these 2 underarm seams, leaving the 2 arms open, and then it's just like a regular jacket. Then we can add the epaulettes, which are these little shoulder tassel things. So you'll see when I mentioned at the start that you didn't need to cut these precisely, you can just add them later. I've just snipped these 2 end sections into 3 and this section here into 5. So if you splay it out you can see that they've got the slits in them, and done the same with this one. And the way we attach these is to just spread them. If you open up the jacket and kind of hold your finger underneath this shoulder seam to flatten it out a bit, we're going to attach these epaulettes along that shoulder seam there so that they kind of straddle both sides of the arm. And we're going to use a single strand of the golden olive coloured thread to do that. So separate out a single strand, fold it in half. You don't need a long length for this at all, so just as it comes in your kit will be absolutely fine. Thread it through your needle, and then we're just going to do this with a few running stitches. So if you arrange it with your fingers so that that centre of the shoulder seam is roughly in the centre of this side of the epaulette here, come from the inside of the jacket up through the epaulette and go down a little way along. Put your needle through that loop to secure the start of the thread, and then we're just going to do a few more of those running stitches in a sort of D shape here around the top of the epaulette. So I'm going to do another couple here. And you want to make sure you stitch either side of that shoulder seam and not quite as far as any of these slits. Whoops, getting a little bit tangled up. Okay. So a running stitch is literally just coming up from the back, going back down a little further along, and then imagine a line around here. You're just doing a continuous up down as you move along. It doesn't have to be perfect. You do just need to make sure that you're not stitching any of the sleeve bits together, so make sure you do have your finger under there, and you, for example, you don't want to attach this side to this side. Make sure it's all quite flat. You can probably hear I'm doing this video at the weekend and everybody's at home, so there is hoovering, there is noisy cars coming back and forth, so I apologise for all the background noises if you can hear them on the camera. Right, so when you've stitched that epaulette into place, so you'll see that's kind of stuck on the shoulder there, you just need to secure the thread, and we're going to do that exactly the same way as we did before. So make one stitch, another stitch on top of it, this is on the back of the fabric obviously, a third stitch, and then go through that loop once and through that loop again and pull it tight to make a knot and trim off the edge, so that's all on the back and you won't see it when he's dressed. And then we're going to do exactly the same with the other side, and then we'll come to the next step. The next element of the tailcoat is to add the cuffs, but we can't do that until the coat is on our mouse, so that's the next thing we're going to do. So let's just straighten out these arms a bit, and the way to dress him is rather like a difficult toddler. Just pop the arms kind of back. You can bend them as much as you need to get them on. The coat's a bit roomier than the trousers, so you hopefully shouldn't need your hemostat as much. And then just use your hemostat to just tug those hands out a bit. Make sure when you're grabbing the hands and toes for dressing the mouse that you grab enough so that you've got the pipe cleaner inside the grip of the hemostat as well. Otherwise you don't want to be pulling the felt on its own, because you'll pull it kind of away from the pipe cleaner a bit. So make sure you get a good grasp of the felt and the pipe cleaner. Just pull those arms out so that he's properly dressed. Now we're going to in order to close this, you need to pull it quite tightly to start with, especially if you've made your mouse quite plump like I have. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to whip stitch this left hand plain side of the jacket to the body to hold that in place, and then we will pull this side, wrap it over that side, and then we'll attach that to the mouse as well. So if your mouse is as fat as mine, you'll need to do a little bit of tugging to get this to close. The felt's got a bit of give in it, so if you there you go, it doesn't take too much tugging just to get it closed. So I'm going to take a piece of green thread, the same that you used to sew up the coat, and again we're going to fold it in half and use the knotless loop start. So to whip stitch this side of the coat closed, hold it to where you want it. You might want to use a couple of pins here actually, they can be quite handy. So if you just want, especially if you're having to pull it a bit tighter to get it wrapped enough, just pop a few pins in, not right next to the edge, but just to hold the fabric where you want it. He'd make quite a good pincushion actually, wouldn't he? Right, and then we're just going to whip stitch this edge to the body. So pop your needle in to the fabric and then bring it out just so it's pushing through his body at the same time. Pop your needle through the loop. Whoops. And then just do that a few times along the length of this. So you're going through the jacket and through the body, just to hold the jacket in place. This won't be seen, so you don't need to worry that it's not neat. It's just to hold it. And you need to be making sure that you're going through the jacket and the body. Okay, so when you are happy that that's all secure, that's not going anywhere, we can take out these pins. And what we want to do now is wrap this side around. Let me just pull this a bit further, jacket a bit further in to give us a bit more room to play with. So we're going to pull this over so that you want the center, the middle of these buttons to come down to meet at the center of his neck roughly. So if your mouse is as fat as mine, you will want to use some pins here just to hold that fabric in place where you've pulled it. Okay, and once you've done that, you need to bring, first of all, push your needle back in to the body of the mouse and bring it up at the back neck, just at the join, just underneath where that neckline comes. This is just to help you come up at a better place to start stitching this other side closed. Go back down very near the same point. You're hiding all these stitches underneath the neckline and then you won't see them later. And what we're going to do is we're going to secure it with stitches that sit right underneath, if you can see where that needle's come up, right underneath these beads, and that way the stitches will be completely hidden. So pull the thread through and then make a stitch, so kind of you can roll the needle to one side and make a stitch right underneath that needle so that it's going to be really hidden in there. And again, you can come up, you can either come up at the neck or you can come up just underneath these epaulettes, just kind of prod about until the needle comes out where you want it, because if it's under those epaulettes, again, it won't be seen. Use your hemostat to pull the needle through. And if you see where we've pulled that, where we've set that stitch right next to that or right underneath that bead for the button, you can't now see it at all. So we're going to make a stitch underneath each of these buttons along this side to hold. So you just go under there. Remember, it won't be seen because he'll be hidden under there. Prod about until you come up just near this bead, this second bead. There we go. Use your hemostat to pull the thread through. Make a stitch right underneath. I'm going to come up at the other side of the epaulette on the other side this time. So that the stitch at the front is hidden behind that bead. Pull the thread through. You can take your pins out as you go along. If they've left a little mark on your felt like mine have there, you can just kind of brush it away with your needle and it'll disappear. We're going to make 2 more stitches, one under this bead and one under this bottom bead. So you go back under where you came out, prod your needle around until you come up at the bead. That'll do nicely. Use your hemostat to pull your needle through and complete the stitch there. Now once you're getting closer to the bottom, it doesn't really matter where you come out, to be honest. You could come out in the middle of the body, you won't see it later, but I'll come out on over here, I think. Let's that bit hold. And then we want to go to the bottom one, bottom bead, that is. Just there. I'm going to come out right in the centre of the back this time, just because it's easier. This last bead is quite far away from those epaulettes, so it's easier to come up directly behind where you're going to be. And then if you're coming through somewhere like this in the centre of the back, just make sure you go through the exact same hole, and then once you pull it through you won't notice it. To secure the thread, I am just going to come up through a few points on here, so I'm just going to go up actually through another bead. It doesn't have to be through another bead, you can secure it by going to and from bits under the neck, bits under the epaulettes, basically anywhere that you're not going to see it later. So now that we've pulled that back, we can brush this all aside and just pull it until it clicks outside of there. And then that stitch is hidden. And once you've been back and forth a couple of times, let's just pretend that I have, otherwise we'll be here for ages, so I'm just going to lop it off here, just for the sake of the video. But you would go in and out a couple more times with a couple more points on the body and chop it off. And then just readjust anywhere that you want to. And then next up we'll do the cuffs. To make the cuffs for your mouse, you need to take one of these little strips, the cuff strips of the yellow felt, and we're just going to wrap them around the end of each arm and secure them with a few stitches. So you want, when you wrap them, you want them to be sort of half over this sleeve and half over the hand, and you need to use a single strand of this golden olive thread folded in half, just like you did for the epaulettes. So I'm going to use a pin just to hold it there, because otherwise it gets a bit fiddly. So the seam is going to go at the bottom. I'm just going to push that pin through there to hold it in place. And we're going to use a few, we're going to start just like we did the blanket stitch. So go in just at the edge here. Put your needle through the loop. And pull it tight, and then you'll probably fit 3 stitches along that cuff, 3 blanket stitches, just to join it in the first instance. Once you've stitched up that bottom seam, what we want to do is just attach this cuff to the actual mouse. So we're going to make a few stitches through the mouse's hand and the end of this jacket. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle, start as if you're finishing off a line of blanket stitch. So I'm just going to go through that once, and then I'm going to push it through in the same spot, but this time instead of coming out at this side, I'm going to push it right through the inside of the hand and come out through the cuff at the top. Let me move that down so you can see. So I've pushed it right through the hand, straight up and out at the side of this cuff. And I'm just going to make one little tacking stitch there. Oops, push it so it's in the right place. So move along a little bit, go back down and stitch again to come out at the bottom. And then we're going to do the same, move along here, and we're going to do the same to stitch through the arm of the jacket and attach, and make a little stitch at the top of the cuff there, attaching it to the top of the jacket. Okay. So you'll have a couple of little stitches at the top there and a row of stitches at the bottom, and then it will just hold that cuff in place so it doesn't fall off. Make a couple of stitches over the top of each other at the bottom seam here. Let me turn it over so you can hopefully see it. Just almost like whip stitches, just to secure the end of the thread. And then the third time you push the needle through, bring it up at the top and just chop it off. Need more hands for this part. And then we're just going to copy that on the other side, and then we're ready to do his crown.